Ever notice how the moment you start explaining yourself too hard, it feels like the power shifts, like you're trying to earn permission to be understood? That's because the second you rush to defend yourself, you're no longer speaking from confidence. You're reacting, and reactions are driven by pressure, fear of judgment, and the need to be seen as right. So today, we're talking about why, when you defend yourself, you've already lost, and how to keep your power without raising your voice, proving your point, or convincing anyone to approve of who you are. Defensiveness shows up the moment we feel threatened in how we want to be seen. It's not always loud. Sometimes it's subtle, like explaining ourselves too quickly or adding extra details no one asked for because we want to make sure they understand our intention. But that right there is the signal. We are trying to get someone to approve our reasoning. We're trying to control how they see us. Confidence doesn't do that. Confidence stands still. Confidence says what is true and lets it sit. Defensiveness is fueled by fear that someone might misunderstand us, and that misunderstanding feels unsafe. So we rush to fix it. But the truth is, if our self-image is solid, misunderstanding doesn't shake us. When someone questions us or challenges our actions, our brain reacts like it's a threat. It becomes about survival of identity. We think, I need them to know I meant well. I need them to know I wasn't wrong. But needing that is what makes us lose power in conversation. Because the moment someone can make us explain ourselves, they control the direction of the interaction. We're no longer choosing how we respond. We're just reacting. And reactions never come from strength. They come from insecurity. The louder we defend, the more we reveal we are bothered. The more we justify ourselves, the more it looks like we doubt our own decision. Think about the people who impress you in difficult situations. It's not the ones who argue, explain, or scramble to be understood. It's the ones who stay centered. They speak once, clearly, and let silence do the rest. Their calm is not arrogance, it's certainty. They know who they are and what they meant. And that inner certainty is louder than any external explanation. People feel that. People notice when you're not trying to earn their understanding. It changes the entire emotional temperature of the interaction. It makes the other person question why you are so calm while they are trying to pull you into a debate. The real shift starts when you become okay with being misunderstood. Not because you don't care about people, but because you know your intentions. The truth doesn't need defending. It stands on its own. The moment you feel the urge to explain yourself, pause. Take a breath. Ask yourself, am I speaking to express truth, or am I speaking to win approval? If your goal is approval, silence is stronger. If your goal is clarity, one calm statement is enough. Everything after that is emotional effort you don't owe to anyone. The freedom comes from realizing you cannot control someone else's perception. You can only control your presence. Confidence is quiet. It moves slowly. It trusts itself. It doesn't panic when someone disagrees. It doesn't chase after being understood. And when you stop defending yourself, you teach people something about you. You teach them that your worth isn't up for negotiation. You teach them that your sense of self doesn't come from their reaction. And that is where the real strength is. Not in convincing, not in proving, not in arguing, but in knowing who you are so well that you don't feel the need to explain it. You become someone who doesn't just speak confidently, but lives confidently, and that changes everything. When you rush to explain yourself, you're stepping into someone else's frame of the conversation. The frame is the invisible structure of who is leading and who is reacting. When someone questions your actions, your character, or your choices, they are trying to place you in a defensive position. And if you respond by explaining, clarifying, or justifying, you're accepting that position. You're proving that their perspective is the one that matters right now. The more you talk, the more you show you feel the need to fix how they see you. That's not confidence. That's surrender disguised as communication. It looks like effort, but it feels like chasing. People know when they've pulled you into defensive mode. The moment they see you scrambling to clarify, they realize they have power. That's the part most people don't recognize. Defensiveness tells the other person, you have influence over how I feel about myself. Even if that's not what you mean, that's what gets communicated. When you defend, you shift the focus away from the real topic and onto your need to be understood. The conversation stops being about truth and becomes about perception. And the person who controls perception controls the outcome. So if they can make you explain, they control the frame. Look at someone who holds their ground without defending. They speak slowly. They don't rush. They don't stack explanations. They don't raise their voice. They don't fight to be believed. They answer once and let silence do the heavy lifting. That lack of urgency is power. It shows they don't need to pull someone into agreement because agreement is not where they get their confidence. They know their choices. They trust their reasoning. They don't need someone else to validate it. And because they're not chasing approval, they come across stronger, clearer, and more grounded. When you feel misunderstood, the instinct is to explain. But explanation does not equal clarity. Explanation often comes from anxiety. Clarity comes from being settled within yourself. When you try to convince someone, you're not speaking from clarity. You're speaking from fear of the gap between how you see yourself and how they might see you. But here's the truth. That gap is always going to exist. You cannot fully control how someone sees you. The harder you try, the more tangled you become in their frame of perception. And once you're tangled, you're no longer leading the conversation. You're responding to it. Learning to stop defending yourself isn't about being cold or detached. It's about learning to tolerate the discomfort of not being immediately understood. That's emotional maturity. It's the ability to let someone sit with their interpretation without rushing to edit it for them. When you say something once and leave it there, you show that you trust yourself. And when the conversation becomes simple and calm, the other person is left with their own thoughts instead of your explanations. They have to reflect, and reflection is where understanding actually happens, not in debate, not in persuasion, in silence. So the shift is simple. Stop caring about winning the moment. Start caring about protecting your presence. The more comfortable you get with not defending yourself, the more grounded you become in who you are. And grounded people don't chase control. They don't try to manage how they're perceived. They speak once, clearly, and then they let go. That's how you stop giving away power in conversations. That's how you stay centered. That's how you step back into your frame. When you find yourself defending your actions or your ideas, it often signals that you've already allowed someone else's judgment to dominate your thinking. The very act of defense is a subtle admission that you feel threatened, that you are playing on their terms rather than your own. When you shift your energy toward proving your point, you give away power that was originally yours. It's not about arrogance or refusing to explain yourself. It's about understanding that your value doesn't need validation from someone who is already positioned as the critic. When people attack or question, the natural impulse is to respond. But that impulse is exactly what keeps you trapped in a cycle where external opinions dictate your inner peace. The moment you stop defending, you reclaim control over your emotions and your presence. Defense implies that your worth is conditional, that it must be argued and substantiated. This is a trap because real influence and strength exist quietly, without need for explanation. When you defend yourself, you grant attention to criticism, elevating its importance in your mind. Criticism, especially when it comes from someone who does not understand your context, is rarely a true reflection of reality. By choosing silence or restraint, you signal that their judgment has no power over your essence. You can continue to act with clarity, make decisions confidently, and live aligned with your principles, all without engaging in unnecessary disputes. Defense is reactive, but mastery is proactive. A defensive stance often stems from insecurity, the feeling that if you don't justify yourself, people will think less of you. Yet the paradox is clear. The more you defend, the less confident you appear. True confidence does not shout. It does not plead. It exists quietly in consistent actions and calm composure. When you stop defending, you allow space for others to recognize your authenticity on their own. People may misinterpret, criticize, or even misunderstand, but your energy is no longer fragmented by trying to convince them. This shift from reaction to presence changes the dynamics of every interaction, leaving you far stronger than the person who attempted to provoke you. Defending yourself also consumes mental and emotional bandwidth, distracting you from meaningful work and growth. Every argument or explanation you give is a form of energy that could be directed toward creating, improving, or advancing yourself. Those who insist on testing you will rarely be satisfied, and no amount of defense can fully control their perception. Recognizing this allows you to disengage from pointless conflicts, protecting your focus and your emotional well-being. Letting go of the urge to defend is a choice that honors your priorities rather than feeding someone else's judgmental curiosity. It is in the restraint that true power quietly asserts itself. Moreover, defending yourself often intensifies conflict rather than resolving it. It escalates tension, draws attention to perceived faults, and reinforces the critic's role in your narrative. Silence, calm, and strategic non-engagement are not signs of weakness. They are a demonstration that your life cannot be dictated by others. By choosing not to defend, you allow situations to unfold naturally, revealing who truly matters and whose opinions are worth your attention. This approach cultivates respect not through argument, but through presence, composure, and unwavering confidence. Finally, when you internalize the idea that defending yourself is unnecessary, you experience a profound freedom. The need for external validation diminishes, and your energy is redirected toward your own vision. People may talk, judge, or misunderstand, but their perception no longer dictates your internal state. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to demonstrate calm authority rather than reactive defensiveness. The world begins to respond to you differently when you act from a place of unshakable confidence rather than trying to persuade others of your value. Mastery is not in defending. Mastery is in being untouchable by the need to justify your existence to anyone else. When you find yourself defending your choices, it often reflects an underlying need for approval, and approval is a fleeting currency that no one can truly own. Every explanation you offer gives weight to the judgment of others, as if their opinion defines your value. The moment you relinquish the need to justify yourself, you step into a space of freedom where your energy is no longer borrowed by someone else's standards. Life responds differently to those who act with quiet certainty, who do not bend to criticism or argument. The power lies not in convincing, but in living with integrity and consistency. When you stop defending, you stop giving critics the power to disturb your equilibrium. Defense is a signal to the world that you are reacting from insecurity rather than acting from purpose. The instinct to explain yourself is natural, yet it often betrays a fear that your truth is insufficient on its own. When you engage in defense, you inadvertently validate the importance of the critic and their perspective. Silence, patience, and presence convey far more strength than words ever could. By choosing not to justify, you demonstrate a confidence that cannot be shaken by transient opinions. Others may misinterpret, doubt, or challenge, but your energy remains intact, unaffected by the need to win approval. When you stop defending, you begin to understand that perception is not reality, and reality does not require validation. People will project, judge, and misread your actions, but those projections do not diminish your truth. Every defense is a concession that external perception has power over your internal state. Releasing this compulsion allows you to operate from clarity, focusing on action rather than reaction. The people who truly matter will see your integrity through your behavior, not through your explanations. This approach cultivates respect without argument and influence without striving to convince. Defending yourself is a reactive mode that often leads to escalation and conflict. When you step out of this cycle, you reclaim control over your interactions and your life. Engagement in defense feeds negativity, reinforces misunderstandings, and often prolongs disputes that could have been resolved through calm detachment. By refusing to defend, you set a boundary that protects your energy and asserts your autonomy. Others may test, challenge, or provoke, but their attempts will encounter the stillness of someone unshaken by the need to explain. In this space, you operate from strategy rather than emotion. Moreover, the act of defense limits your focus and diverts your energy from what truly matters. Every argument or clarification consumes attention, emotional capacity, and time that could be spent on creating, growing, and advancing yourself. Those who insist on judging you rarely see beyond their own perspective, and no amount of explanation will change that. Recognizing this truth allows you to disengage strategically and maintain momentum in your own life. The less you defend, the more you redirect energy toward your priorities, building a life defined by purpose rather than reaction. Ultimately, mastery is found in restraint, in the ability to navigate criticism without surrendering your composure. When you let go of the impulse to defend, you demonstrate an unshakable confidence that speaks louder than any argument ever could. The world begins to interact with you differently, respecting the calm authority that arises from self-possession. You no longer live under the influence of others' judgments, and your focus remains on what you can control: your actions, your choices, and your presence. True power is quiet, deliberate, and unbothered by the need to justify itself. When you feel the urge to defend yourself, it is often a sign that you are engaged in a battle that does not belong to you. The energy spent on convincing others, justifying your choices, or explaining your actions is energy stolen from your own life. True power lies not in explanation, but in presence, in the quiet confidence that emanates without argument. Those who seek to challenge or criticize are often reflecting their own limitations, not your reality. When you disengage from the need to defend, you remove their influence over your inner state. You begin to operate from a place of authority that cannot be shaken by external opinion. Defense keeps you trapped in reactive cycles, constantly responding to the judgments and perceptions of others. Every word, every explanation, every attempt to convince is a concession that their view has power over you. The moment you release the need to defend, you reclaim your sovereignty and redirect your energy toward what truly matters. Life rewards those who act from integrity rather than reaction, and the quieter confidence you display draws respect far more effectively than any argument ever could. By refusing to justify yourself, you assert a presence that others cannot challenge without acknowledging your strength. The desire to defend oneself is often rooted in fear, the fear of being misunderstood, judged, or dismissed. Yet the paradox is simple. The more you defend, the more you highlight that fear. True mastery over life and relationships comes from transcending that need for external validation. When you hold your position calmly and refuse to explain, you demonstrate that your value is inherent, not conditional on approval. Others may attempt to provoke or pressure, but your composure becomes a shield that their words cannot penetrate. This is the subtle power of non-defense. It is unyielding, strategic, and undeniably authoritative. Defending yourself also clouds judgment and drains mental clarity. The more time and effort spent on responding to criticism, the less time you have to focus on creation, growth, and meaningful action. People who are determined to misjudge or challenge will rarely be swayed by explanation. Recognizing this allows you to disengage intentionally, protecting your focus, your energy, and your emotional well-being. By stepping back from the compulsion to defend, you maintain a forward trajectory in life, prioritizing influence through action rather than argument. Non-defense transforms your presence in the world. When you no longer react to every criticism or misinterpretation, you send a message of strength that cannot be verbalized or disputed. Silence and restraint become your tools, signaling that your sense of self is self-contained and not subject to negotiation. Those who observe will notice, respect, and sometimes even question their own assumptions about you. The power of choosing not to defend yourself lies in the subtle authority it projects, the quiet mastery that reshapes relationships and interactions without confrontation.